Welcome to Cinema Bites, your go-to for movie recaps in a flash. Big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. The movie begins in America after a new type of infection emerges, spreading across the country, turning the population into an army of zombies. When the president sees the increasing threat of the undead, he initiates isolation measures, surrounding many cities with high walls. Additionally, they invent a drug called Zombie-Infested, which slows the effects of the disease inside the human body. This drug is distributed everywhere in the country. However, the government has other plans for Zombie-Infested. In one of the quarantined cities called Estimation, a journalist named Chase Carter and his assistant Jordan begin investigating the origin of the infection. They discover that the US military and government were behind the zombie outbreak in the city. The goal wasn't just to distribute Zombie-Infested, but also to use the situation as an excuse to implant tracking chips in every infected individual. Amidst the chaos, Chase manages to escape the city, while Jordan records all the evidence proving the military's involvement, led by General Lyons. However, as she tries to escape, government agents capture her, and her whereabouts become unknown. 2 years after the outbreak, Estimation has turned into a ghost town, with the military using the area as a base for their secret plans. At this time, Chase returns to the city and tracks a military convoy to a parking lot near a building. With the help of his hacker friend Sandra, fellow journalist Jill, and an informant named Zane, who reveals the location of the secret base, Chase plans to infiltrate the building and expose the military's plans. However, Zane refuses to enter, demanding his payment. Chase pays him and gives him a gun for protection before sneaking into the building with his camera. Inside, Chase sees General Lyons speaking with a gang leader known as Skinner about a project called Afterlife. Their conversation is interrupted when Skinner's men find Zane and take him to their leader. Chase secretly records everything with his camera for Sandra, but is unable to intervene to help Zane. Ultimately, Skinner kills Zane with his knife, and one of Skinner's men spots Chase watching. The alarm is triggered, and Chase escapes to a storage room filled with zombies trapped in plastic bags. One of the zombies breaks free and attacks Chase, but he manages to knock it down and smash its head with a chair. Chase finds an exit and escapes to an alley, with the military and Skinner's men chasing him. He manages to evade them, but another zombie appears in front of him. Chase fights it off with a metal pipe, eventually impaling it on a sharp iron rod and finishing it off. Afterward, Chase reaches the street and reunites with Sandra, who is relieved to see him alive but slaps him for risking his life this way. Despite her frustration, Chase manages to record everything on video. They decide to present the evidence to the newspaper editor. Unfortunately, the editor refuses to publish the videos, claiming they are insufficient to accuse the military. He warns that General Lyons and his team would become government targets. Frustrated, Chase feels his efforts were in vain, especially since his partner Jordan is still missing. His relationship with Sandra is also strained, as she feels he is obsessed with the investigation, constantly putting his life in danger. Jill, noticing Chase's state, suggests he go to a bar to relax. That night, while in the bar's restroom, Chase meets a man named George Hancock, an executive at the company Phenatrans, which manufactured Zombie-Infested. George reveals he has classified information about the Afterlife project, but warns that they must leave the area immediately, as the military is aware of Chase's involvement and is hunting him. Moments later, the military arrives at the bar, but George finds an escape route through the building's roof, and they flee in his car. On the way, George explains that the Afterlife project is a containment plan to eliminate all infected individuals with tracking chips implanted in their bodies. Once the project is activated, the chips will release high doses of Zombie-Infested, instantly killing the victims. Under General Lyons' command, the project is set to be implemented within 24 hours unless stopped. Over 1 million people with the chips are at risk of dying. Upon learning the full truth, Chase vows to stop the project, especially since Sandra is one of the victims carrying a chip. Chase gathers his team and heads to the home of Garv, an old friend and weapons supplier. After explaining the situation, Garv agrees to help, as he owes Chase a favor. With Garv's support, George provides evidence revealing a secret base where the Afterlife project is being activated. The team must infiltrate the facility and access a program to stop the project. If everything goes as planned, they will be rescued by a contact named Chuck. Once preparations are complete, the team heads to Estimation. Chase asks Jill to stay behind to ensure the story reaches the public if things go wrong. After hours of travel, the team arrives at an old factory with a secret tunnel leading to the city. Meanwhile, General Lyons learns that George Hancock is Chase's informant and confronts Susan, the head of Phonotrans. When Lyons discovers she opposes the Afterlife project, he insists on proceeding with the plan to prevent another zombie outbreak. He orders his assistant, Captain Smith, to track down Chase and George. Captain Smith's investigation leads him to Garv's house, where Jill is waiting for updates from Chase. Hearing the soldiers approaching, Jill hides on the balcony but leaves her laptop on the table. When Captain Smith enters the apartment, he finds the laptop and learns of Chase's plan to stop the project. He relays the information to the military base and orders the use of weapons against Chase and his team. Back in the tunnel, Chase's team finds scattered corpses, evidence of a recent confrontation. They change their route but fall into a trap in a nearby room. Skinner and his men appear and capture the group. The gang leader orders Chase and the others to be taken to another room, leaving Garv hanging in the trap for interrogation. In the new room, filled with chemicals, Chase pretends to be an agent for Lyons, claiming he was sent to deliver a message. Skinner doesn't believe him and threatens to take Sandra elsewhere for questioning. This enrages Chase, who pushes a table toward the men. George hits one of them with a bottle, and a confrontation ensues. Chase and Sandra set out to confront Skinner. At the same time, Garv is attacked by one of the men with a baseball bat, but he manages to disarm him and uses the bat to finish him off. After that, Garv pulls a knife from his pocket and cuts the rope, heading to the room to help the rest of the group. When he arrives, he finds Chase dropping a knife on the ground, and then Sandra stabs the madman's leg with it. In the end, Garv shoots the remaining men, but chemicals spill on the ground and the room begins to catch fire. They all run to escape the place, barely making it out before the explosion. Unfortunately, all their equipment and weapons are destroyed except for George's flash drive. The explosion attracts many zombies to the tunnels. Chase notices one zombie that looks different from the others. This zombie runs at high speed toward the group, catching Garv and biting his neck. Chase rushes to help his friend, stomping on the zombie's head until he notices strange markings on its neck. The group continues their escape toward the tunnel's end, only to find the exit blocked. Without weapons, they grab any tools they can find to fight the zombies. Eventually, Garv manages to destroy the door handle, allowing them to escape the tunnel. The group reaches a workshop with Garv severely injured from the bite. Sandra quickly uses Zombrex to prevent his transformation into a zombie, but they still lack weapons or equipment to complete their mission. Luckily, Chase finds various items in the workshop, and they all begin assembling makeshift weapons to fight the zombies. Minutes later, the group heads to the city armed with sticks, saws, knives, and even screwdrivers. They must hurry as less than 6 hours remain until the project is executed. The four take a shortcut through the hospital, but shortly after, a military convoy appears. Two men step out to investigate, forcing Chase and the others to hide in the hospital garage. When the men leave, they use a flashlight to see in the dark, only for more zombies to appear and surround the area, including the advanced versions they encountered in the tunnels. One of them leaps at Chase, but Garv saves him using his makeshift weapon. The group continues fighting the zombies, but their numbers are overwhelming. They struggle to reach the hospital entrance. The situation worsens as more advanced zombies attack Garv. They sniff him and back off, indicating that Garv is still infected. The fight continues. George and Sandra fend off the zombies, but one of them knocks Sandra to the ground and tries to bite her. She defends herself by activating a torch and burning the zombie's face. Nearby, Chase starts a car and drives into the zombies, but they jump onto the vehicle, trying to break the windshield. Among them, Garv appears, now a zombie, infected with a new strain. Even Zombrex couldn't stop his transformation. Chase mourns his friend's fate, but hurries to find George and Sandra, who manage to reach the hospital entrance. A reporter attempts to join them, but a zombie breaks through the glass in front of him and tries to bite him. Chase strikes it with the flashlight and escapes through the car's back window. There, he faces Garv again. The zombie advances toward him, leaving Chase no choice but to use his stick with a saw to strike Garv's head, ending him completely. Afterward, Chase runs to the stairs and locks the door behind him. He tries to contact Sandra via radio, but no one responds. He then moves through the hospital corridors, encountering another zombie. With a swift move, Chase slides and strikes the zombie's leg, followed by multiple blows to its head. Thinking he's safe, another zombie suddenly attacks him, knocking him to the ground. The reporter narrowly avoids being bitten, using his stick to strike the zombie's head. The situation worsens as more creatures emerge. At the last moment, Chase escapes toward the hospital's escalator. He slides down the escalator's railing, using his weapon to decapitate zombies one by one. At the bottom, he jumps to another escalator, but this time the zombies follow him, surrounding him and preparing to devour him. Just when it seems too late, a mysterious young woman appears, eliminating the creatures with precise shots. She then grabs a fire extinguisher and smashes another zombie's skull, revealing herself as Jordan, Chase's old partner. Without time for explanations, she orders him to follow her to a safe place. Now, only 4.5 hours remain before the project's activation. Meanwhile, Jill meets with the newspaper editor to seek his help. Despite knowing the risks, he agrees and brings along Susan's assistant, who has critical information about the involvement of the Vino Trans Company and the military. He reveals that the organization's scientist, Dr. Randy, is responsible for executing the Afterlife project. In exchange for his services, he requested the military supply him with test subjects for his cruel experiments, supposedly aimed at finding a cure for the zombie infection. Since then, Susan has been funding his research, hoping to monopolize the cure if discovered, thus profiting massively. Because of this, the head of Vinotrans supported the Afterlife project, believing that if the infected with the chip died, the disease would disappear, and her company would go bankrupt. Seeing his boss's greedy intentions, the assistant decided to hand over the evidence to Jill, stored in a flash drive. This way, they could remove her control over the company and prevent more victims from falling into her schemes. Back at the hospital, Chase tries to talk to Jordan, asking what happened to her during all this time. He says he published her recordings exposing the military's involvement in spreading the zombie outbreak, but no one believed him. His reputation as a reporter was destroyed. In the end, he apologizes to Jordan for abandoning her, but she doesn't respond, focusing instead on assembling weapons to fight the zombies. Moments later, one of her companions appears, bringing Sandra and George, who managed to escape alive. Chase is overjoyed to see them, but informs them that Garv died after being infected with the new strain of the disease. He also introduces Sandra to Jordan, but she still remains silent. At this point, her companion reveals Jordan's tragic fate. Dr. Randy used her as a test subject to experiment with new strains of the disease. Fortunately, they both managed to escape, but her companion was bitten by a zombie and is close to turning as well. This revelation fuels Chase's determination to complete the mission, though he hesitates to take Jordan back to the place where she was experimented on. Surprisingly, she agrees. She goes with them because she's the only one who knows how to get in and out of the secret base. By then, it's already 1 o'clock. The group heads to the location, and teammate Jordan decides to stay behind, knowing that he's very close to turning into a zombie. After a few minutes, they find the base and enter through a secret tunnel that only Jordan knows. When they arrive, they find the lower level, which houses the experimental animals of Dr. Randy, who couldn't survive his horrifying experiments. Jordan quickly takes out the guards with her spear and leads the group to the server room, where they encounter a soldier named Todd. Jordan distracts him while Sandra and George ambush and capture him. As soon as George connects the flash drive to the server, Sandra begins the process to stop the project. However, it will take 20 minutes for the process to complete. The breach is detected by one of General Lyon's soldiers who tries to stop the operation but fails. The only solution now is to delay the file upload to the flash drive for the required time. At this moment, Jordan remembers all the pain she endured during the experiments and decides to go alone to find Dr. Randy. Knowing he can't leave her again, Chase runs after her, promising Sandra that he will return for her. Minutes later, Jordan finds the lab and sees a doctor resembling Dr. Randy performing surgery on one of the experimental animals. Without hesitation, she drives her spear into the doctor's neck, only to discover that it's not Randy. Suddenly, the real scientist appears from behind and attacks her with an electric shock, knocking her unconscious. Back in the server room, the file upload is slow. Todd is asked how to bypass General Lyon's arrival. Initially, he refuses, but after Sandra tells him that the lives of many people will be in his hands if they don't stop the project, he has a crisis of conscience and provides the password to block Lyons' access. However, the general discovers the breach in the secret base and orders a plane to destroy the entire building. Meanwhile, in the lab, Chase finds the scientist using a new strain of the virus on Jordan. The reporter tries to stop him while secretly relaying everything to Sandra and gathering more evidence for the investigation. The scientist reveals that the military and the Venetrans Corporation gave in to the idea of finding a cure for the zombie virus. He continued his research using healthy experimental animals like Jordan, not just to reverse the infection but to advance the next stage of human evolution. The doctor believes the virus prevents the victim from dying, and if he can reconfigure it, he could unlock the secret to immortality. However, he needs to provide something to the military and Venetrans to continue his experiments, which is why he developed the Afterlife project. Midway through his explanation, Jordan begins to exhibit a strange reaction. indicating that the virus is spreading through her body. The doctor gives Chase a choice: use the antidote and eliminate the chance of finding a cure, or let her become infected and continue his research. Before Chase can decide, George arrives in the lab and empties his gun into the scientist. He then pulls out a vial containing samples of the antidote Randy created. George reveals his true plan: to steal the cure from the scientist and become the new owner of Venetrans. To eliminate witnesses, he shoots Chase, but the reporter manages to dodge. George escapes the lab. The reporter tries to help Jordan and asks Sandra to find the vial number containing the antidote in the system. Using her hacking skills, she finds the information, and Chase retrieves the sample to save Jordan. However, the situation worsens as George, before escaping, activates the building's control system, releasing all the experimental animals. As a result, dozens of zombies flood the base, hungry for flesh. Some of them begin to enter the server room. Todd orders Sandra to hurry, or all their efforts will be in vain. Seeing that there are only a few minutes left until the upload is complete, Sandra grabs a pair of pliers from the locker and removes the chip from her shoulder as a precaution. She also takes a dose of Zombrex from the emergency kit. Finally, the program on the flash drive shuts down the system, and now everyone must escape. However, Todd has no chance as the zombies devour him alive. Sandra, unable to save him, escapes with the Zombrex to the elevator, waiting for Chase, who is about to use the antidote on Jordan. Within seconds, the lab is overrun with zombies. Chase uses the resources he finds in the lab to defend himself, including retrieving his chainsaw staff. In a series of attacks, he eliminates all the zombies and successfully administers the antidote to Jordan, freeing her from the virus. The two rush to the rooftop, where they find Sandra fighting off zombies. Additionally, Chuck arrives in a helicopter, firing at the creatures and throwing one of them into the helicopter's blades. Once they clear a path, they all escape onto the helicopter just seconds before the military plane reaches the base and fires missiles at the entire building. Thanks to Chase, Sandra, and Jordan, everyone with a chip is saved. Hours later, George escapes the city. However, his plan fails as his path is blocked by Captain Smith, who shoots him dead. The captain continues his investigation in the tunnel, leaving the victim's body to be devoured by zombies. However, he doesn't notice when George's hand makes a sudden movement, indicating that he used Dr. Randy's antidote on himself and may have achieved the immortality the scientist dreamed of. This is the end of the film. See you in another recap